Starting in the fall, our first meeting, I should say, would start October 11th for the first fall Messy Conversations. Put it on your calendars. We hope to see you there. Same time, different link. We will have a different link for the Messy Conversations, although it will be on Monday at 4 o'clock on the 11th of October. A new link will be sent out with the announcements. So if there's anyone that needs to email us, if we don't have their email already, as an Antiochian, please feel free to drop it in the chat for us so we can make sure we follow up with you. And another announcement is BSU is going to be having their check-in on Wednesday at noon, kind of a brown bag lunch. And it is the Antioch Los Angeles campus hosting a check-in appointment, see how you are doing, and get to know a few other people. So that announcement will also be part of the chat today if you wanted to pay attention and take down that information so you can join us on the 4th Wednesday at 12 o'clock until 1 o'clock. Pop in anytime. And I will hand it over to Sarah Beth for today's session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Beth Laurie from the Seattle campus, faculty there. And I'm honored and excited for this messy conversation today entitled Intersectionality, Disability Justice, and Student Support. I hope you were able to see the biographies of our panelists. The first one is Jess Minckley. And Jess is a student in our CMHC program here at Antioch, and a diversity fellow for 2021. And she is also the person who started AUDJA, the group that we're going to be helping the community to learn about today. And it's the Antioch Disability Justice and Student Disability Justice. This is hard for me. Jess, what
Alliance.
Is Alliance. I want to call this the Disability Justice League, but it's really the Alliance. So thank you. Danielle Hammond is here with us to talk about student support and retention as a student success and retention specialist on our Seattle campus, and has recently completed her master's in education here as well. And we're really excited to have her talk more about what's available and possible for students in the way of support. We also have two other panelists, Shoshana Glick, who is a queer, disabled, white-bodied Jewish cis woman studying couple and family therapy and drama therapy here at Antioch. And Meg is a third-year clinical psych student at Antioch University, New England, who's completed a practicum there that is around psychiatric support, and also a member of AUDJA. I also want to say that Jess started a second group, which is the Queer Club. So there's going to be some support for multiple student groups and opportunities for students to connect with other students and faculty as well. I'm one of the faculty liaisons in this group, and there are several of us across our campuses who have offered to provide this support, and it seems very needed, and also is really an important part of student success here at Antioch. So with that, I will have our panelists take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah Beth. Hi, everybody. I'm Jess Minckley. I'm going to show us some slides so that you can kind of get acquainted with who we are and what we do, and also just get on the same page about a few terms. And then we're going to talk about the complexity of student experience, especially in the wake of the pandemic and what that looks like for folks in our community. And I wanted to start by inviting Danielle to talk a little bit about her role in student services.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Danielle. I am the Student Success and Retention Specialist for the Seattle campus. It is a new position, and I had the opportunity to listen to the messy conversation that the admissions team gave, and I heard them talking about what it takes to get students to campus. And I see this position as being focused on what it takes to get those students through school. Um, I'm a student, or I just recently graduated, but I've been a student at Antioch, and I've had the opportunity to learn from other students. But now within this position, I'm still focused on being student-centered and really listening to what it is the students say they need. It is a new position, so I feel there's a lot of opportunity to provide support to students, and a lot of opportunity to really influence what that infrastructure for support looks like. I think for me personally, I've had a personal experience. I've been talking to students and also been very research centered on what supports students, and especially non-traditional students. And what it comes down to is student success or creating an environment of belonging a lot of the time. So to me, that looks like being engaged in the school's diversity and equity work. And I've definitely done that. I'm continuing to, my hope is to continue to be a part of those conversations, and also within this position help to keep the university, or at least the Seattle campus, accountable for the work that we know needs to happen and the work that is happening. I'm talking really fast because I know that there's a lot of panelists and we have a lot to get through. But other things that I just wanted to say that within this position, I'll also be focused on creating more opportunities to listen to students and to really hear from them, and also connect them to opportunities to build community and connection, and as well as some programming to increase mentorship. I believe in a holistic approach, and because I have like a openness to really learn about what the students specifically at Antioch need, then I think there's opportunity to address many different needs of students, and I have found that there's been a lot of support for that so far, though I still am learning kind of the limitations of the position. And I feel that this position is important because I'm not an advisor, I can focus on the outside classroom needs. So I'm working like with student life to help connect students to build the affinity groups and build their connections, but also I get to focus on the outside classroom needs of the students. I'm really, really super excited about that. And also I'm excited about the work that I'm doing with the Student Success Committee. Right now, they're on an institutional level, across the institution, there's changes happening in the way that we view student success, and we're working to define what that looks like, and then also how to improve practice. So a mixed bag of things, but more so, I guess the overall thing is just having a fresh perspective and being able to identify as a student with many intersections in my own personal identity, I feel is what I bring to this position, and what I'm excited about this position being created for, and me having the opportunity to be another voice at the table to help move the work forward that needs to happen on a campus level and then across the institution as a whole.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle, for being here with us today. And I wanted to thank everybody who is responsible for putting messy conversations together, for the opportunity for us to come and speak with you today. And we hope for a great, fruitful, and potentially messy conversation. So the other people who are here, Shoshana and Meg and myself, are some of the members of the Antioch University Disability Justice Alliance, which is a mouthful. So we made an acronym And if you pronounce the acronym, it sounds like AUDJA. And so we may refer to AUDJA through the rest of our talk today. So it's important to kind of delineate what AUDJA is and potentially what AUDJA is not. But I wanted everybody to know that there are a few kind of branches of AUDJA. So AUDJA is comprised of students, faculty, and staff and administration. So we are all engaged in dialogue about the needs of students with disabilities. And it also includes some offshoots, including the student affinity group. So this is a group where students with disabilities and also allies or future clinicians who need to know about disability can come to create community around disability justice. There are opportunities for research, education of other members of our community and the community at large, and also social justice advocacy. Another key piece to why we come together is to engage in what's called community care, which oftentimes one will see individual members of a marginalized community bearing the brunt of societal inequality themselves. And so to try to disperse that burden amongst many people so that we can all carry it together. And so that leads us to the topic of conversation today, which is intersectionality. And so I'm going to breeze through some of this, and it'll be talk heavy by me in the front end, but then it will turn more into a conversation, I promise. I wanted to introduce the term intersectionality, which was coined in the 80s by Dr. Crenshaw. And it speaks to the fact that all of us have interwoven identity factors such as race, ability, and sexual orientation, et cetera, that give us privileges and or oppressions. And so sometimes when studying intersectionality, it's easy to think that this is the oppression Olympics. And so let me explain what that means. While it may be more difficult, and most likely is more difficult for a lesbian Black woman to advocate for her accommodations to be met, we cannot separate. Let's just talk about your disability right now without addressing who the person with a disability is. So I hope it makes sense that disability justice work is anti-racist work, and anti-racist work engages in other identities as well. If anybody has things to say at any point or questions, please feel free to engage with the chat. We will open up for conversation at the hour. So what I was talking about intersecting disadvantages is part of white supremacy culture. And I'll just read you this quote about what that means. The power elite constructed and continues to construct white supremacy to intersect with, support, reinforce, and reproduce capitalism, class oppression, gender oppression, heterosexism, ableism, Christian hegemony, to name a few. And so what we're talking about is the intersection of anti-racism and disability justice today. So it hopefully supports that premise. If you don't already know, ableism is a term that has been used to talk about social prejudice against people with disabilities and or people who are perceived to have disabilities. I did a diversity talk as part of my fellowship this year about disability, which delineated that there are the ABCs of ableism. And I also polled the audience, and I want to actually do that again if it's replicable. Sarah Beth, is it possible to send a poll? You do not have to participate in this poll if you do not want to, but this may help us to gather some kind of reasonable approximation of who in this conversation with 37 people present maybe experiencing or have experienced a disability at one point in their life. Is it possible to do that poll, Sarah Beth?
Sorry, unfortunately, I was not able to get it to work.
Okay.
So maybe it could be something that we do for reflection.
Sure.
People could just.
So during that presentation that I gave, I'll just tell you what we found out. So there were more people in that room than there are here right now. And when I polled the audience before talking about what disability is, about 30% of the audience had or had experienced a disability. By the end, after explaining what disability is or can be, 90% of the room had or had experienced a disability at one point in their life. So ableism is about people perceiving someone as inferior, attitudes and emotions about disabled people in general, things like this sign that says in fire emergency, do not use an elevator. Behaviors and policies and practices that negate someone's humanity and civil rights as a person who needs accommodations, and even our thoughts. So stereotypical beliefs about what constitutes a disabled person. And many of us may have an unchecked bias that people with disabilities are people in wheelchairs, the end. And we may not know that it is much more expansive than that. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is a little bit more about what is a disability, just so that we can all get on the same page. Just as there is ableism, there's also something called disableism, and that's just outright denying jobs, housing, education, parental rights, and opportunities to people with disabilities upon finding out that they are disabled. So there are many different kinds of disabilities. Developmental are not meeting markers when you are a child, or being born with something that inhibits, and I'm going to use air quotes here in case you can't see me, normal development, and that's based on an ever-changing societal standard. Folks who are neuroatypical or neuroqueer. As a member of the queer community, I think it's okay if I say neuroqueer, and I am a neuroqueer person. Cognitive differences, learning disabilities, physical disabilities that are visible from the outside or not, and mental health disabilities. So I see a lot of people in this room wearing glasses. If you could not drive without your glasses, if you could not read without your glasses, you could fit into our club. If you have ever experienced pregnancy, you have also experienced disability, because that's how our society looks at pregnancy, is a disability. So we also want to kind of define a little bit more, what does neuroatypical mean? So this could be folks that are on the autism spectrum, people with learning disabilities or cognitive difference. Those that you might know are ADHD and dyslexia. Oh, that's cute that I spelled dyslexia wrong. It's just so appropriate. Traumatic brain injury, medical illnesses that affect the brain, including seizures and migraine disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and various other mental illnesses as designated by the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. So I know that I'm cruising through a lot of this. What may solidify in your mind might be a meme. I know for all of you students out there, sometimes the meme is the thing that makes it stick. So check out this thing that I found on Facebook. Somebody shared brain scans of folks with quote unquote normal brains on the left, and what those brain scans look like in different disorders. I could also air quote disorders here for you, paying particular attention to PTSD, which is on the lower left of your screen. So in the normal brain, for those of you who can't see this, there are certain areas highlighted by different colors. And then next to that is a brain with ADHD, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, or bipolar disorder that are lit up in different areas with different colors. And what that tells you is that these brains are working differently as opposed to abnormally. So even if you can't see it, it's still real, even if the person is undiagnosed or doesn't even know that they're experiencing these things, it's still affecting them. Which brings me to trauma, something that everyone in this room has been experiencing over the last year or so. As a result of the worldwide pandemic. In addition to that, intergenerational trauma is a term that talks about how people's genes changed when under chronic stress. The definition that I like the most of this is oppression equals trauma. Racism is traumatic. The term post-traumatic slave syndrome was coined by Dr. DeGruy in her book on the topic, which you can find out more about also in a book that many of these ideas come from, called My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. And so I implore those of you who are interested in future reading to investigate articles written by these authors if you can't handle the whole book. And then we've also compiled some resources with you. So I'm going to download this slideshow and excuse me, it will be uploaded to the Messy Conversations Sakai for those of you who would like to read more about any of these things, or you can take this opportunity to take a screenshot for yourself. I realize the links will not work if you do it that way, but these are all Googleable. So that is a basic primer of what we might need to know to start engaging in a conversation about the complexities of student experience within the Antioch University community at large. And we can begin anyway. One of the things that I would like to say is at some point during this conversation as well, I'm going to be representing students from the Seattle campus who have agreed to have their experience spoken into this space by members of AUDJA. And that will be anonymized, but it will hopefully illustrate some of the student experience for those of you who may not know what that's like for students. So let's have a conversation. What do you think, Danielle, or Meg, or Shoshana, or Sarah Beth?
My name is Tawane. It's my first time. This is my second time because last time I didn't introduce myself. My name is Tawane. I'm a student here in Antioch, Seattle, Washington. And I would like to hear more from you, because I don't want to go this. I'll be maybe hearing from you, and then I will talk later. Thank you.
Thanks, Tawani.
I really,
No, that's is my teacher, Sarah Beth.
I'm glad you're
I'm
here.
greeting.
Tawani.
I'm greeting you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Sho.
I really like the when you bring in glasses as an example of what a disability is, because glasses are so accessible and they're so commonplace that functionally, because that accommodation is there for most people, they're able to interact with the world as if that disability isn't impairing them. And what I want to like put out there, my personal perspective on disability, is that most disabilities are like that. With the proper accommodation, the individual is completely capable of doing myriad other things, but because the world hasn't offered an adaptation or isn't constructed in a way that makes it easy to navigate this shift from what has been determined normal in a particular society, they're impaired. And in our culture, which is so focused on output, how you perform, what you do, what you can bring, it's in my experience growing up, I experienced any deficit in output as a deficit of me as a human being, as a daughter, as a student, as a worker. And I don't think that that's useful. Could you imagine if anyone who needed glasses wasn't able to participate in the workforce or go to school? So that's what I'm putting out there.
Thanks, Sho. Yeah, I realized also I'm going to put the link to the YouTube video of my presentation, which talks a lot more about what other kinds of disabilities are for people who can see this chat in real time. Thanks, Sho. We're here to talk about our community and things that collude with racism to inhibit student success, and would love to hear personal experiences or experiences that people have that may speak to that. And I'm happy to also speak some of those student experiences from the forum. Danielle, do you want to speak a little bit about supporting students in your role that may have experienced disability, without obviously saying anything about particular people?
Yes, I can say that all of my support right now is very case by case basis. So I think that I'm still learning what it takes, which is why your presentation and the diversity dialogue you have are super helpful. I don't know if I can speak specifically as to what that looks like or what the challenges are, but other than saying like, yes, I have an openness and a willingness. I've heard you say like, you have to believe students. So really figuring out how I can be the best advocate for students and their needs, and just a listening ear is how I see my position supporting students with disabilities.
Thanks. Meg, what about you? What do you think the importance of people who are becoming educators and clinicians need to know about the disability experience, or anything else?
Well, I thought about it twofold from your question. I came back to school after a long career in community mental health, and I worked a lot with developmentally disabled community and thinking about, so when I think of disability, I also think of that group where even with accommodations, they interact with a world that can be very foreign to the typical. And so thinking about how we are trained as practitioners, as community supporters, kind of being aware of those, the ableist kind of, like, how do we in our hearts hold this community that may not be able to communicate or participate with accommodations at this supposed optimum level. So having more kind of understanding of how to be a better community partner with that segment of our world. And I also think intersectionality wise with that population, with the added layer of being someone with communication or behavioral challenges and a person of color, that adds such a level of danger to their world. And the threat of harm and incarceration is even higher because of the fear involved.
Yeah, thank you for bringing those topics in. For one of the community events that recently happened, which was the online social justice symposium hosted by the Seattle campus, Shoshana and I presented on accessibility in counselor education. And I'm happy to, I'm just going to be pumping some links in. So for those of you who are not accustomed to just being blasted with links, I apologize. Is about ableist practices and paradigms in education and how that may inhibit development of a student at the graduate level or even at the undergraduate level. But thanks for bringing in also what happens in education even prior to this.
I'll say as a faculty member that it can be really confusing for students who may not have a diagnosis, who may be learning about some issues. And I think of the time during the pandemic when we're all at home and trying to do this on a screen, and where we're learning about ourselves in a way that we never have, in terms of what we need and what's difficult for us and what challenges there are in communication with others. I am disabled. I have 4 disabilities, and I noticed during the pandemic, it was harder for me to fake eye contact, which I'm not sure we're giving on a screen, but it's harder for me to look at people even now that I'm unmasked or walking in the street, and something that could cause fatigue in a person with a disability will have a much greater effect than the fatigue it might cost a person who doesn't have the complicated challenges in front of them. I also know that that getting a diagnosis isn't always what people want to do, or it's scary, or it costs too much money for them. And I think those are real barriers and real challenges. I have a colleague and friend who is working for the Arc of King County, and he did a beautiful job of facilitating a messy conversation on what was titled Black Spectrum, which I'm putting in the chat right now. And this is an incredible opportunity to hear from 4 individuals that are on the spectrum, which is one of the disabilities that ADA acknowledges. And you can hear from them directly about their experiences and how complex it becomes when the oppressions and the microaggressions and all of the challenges to working in a white system feel. And so I think that there's more than anything that I've learned for my own self, but also in my work with students, in my work with my colleagues, is that every single human is so different, and what they need is so different. And the way that our behavior comes across is cultural. And our culture may have 12 components to it. It may not just be our ethnic culture or our family culture. And so the communication expectations that people have of faculty or that have of students is different from person to person, and creating support for everybody all at the same time that works well is really challenging. And in order to create support for everybody, we need to hear from everybody. And it's not so exciting to tell people this is your experience.
Mhm.
The people in that video I'm sharing were very brave to say, please share this far and wide, because we want people to understand these complexities, especially educators.
Yeah,
And
you bring up so many great points, Sarah Beth. And one, I think, is the fact that a lot of people just don't know a whole lot about the disability world or experience. And some of the testimonies that I have speak to that. So I think just in general, if this was more part of conversations in general, I think that would benefit all people. This is a recruitment and retention issue. We heard from MENSMA a couple weeks ago in this Messy Conversation series, and especially now during the prolonged pandemic, I think that these are conversations that we all need to be having. It's pressing, it's necessary. And if any decisions are being made at the university level, I think members of any community would be well to be considered in how policies are being changed, et cetera. So one of the slogans of the disability justice movement is nothing about us without us. And you see this a lot in Autism Speaks, is a organization completely made of non-autistic people making decisions about what the autistic community needs, for example. And I think that if this was kind of more out there, it would be great. But you also spoke to the issue of people being out or not about having a disability.
I know I've told you this before, Jess, but my own experience when I was 24, 25, I was told by a psychologist that I was retarded. That was the term that was used for autism at the time. That was a psychologist. So to me, it was a difficult thing to come into educational environments after that was what I was told. It didn't make sense to me. I was actually raised next door to a group home where I saw people with incredible physical and intellectual disabilities, and I was like, wait, but I'm a little different, but this doesn't make sense. And I think, and I have yet to have somebody explain the difference between all of those that actually does make sense because of that issue of everybody's situation. Like we grow up with, maybe something happens in childhood, maybe it happens in utero, and we are so incredibly adaptive, most of us. And we find ways to make what we have to deal with work. But that's not always optimal. And so to think about finishing school or being in school with peers or asking for help, especially, is dependent on our relationships with each other and the amount of trust we have in the people that are guiding us. And if we don't know them or don't feel safe, that's going to affect every single classroom we come into or show up in on Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the tenets of trauma-informed care can be well utilized in thinking about working with building rapport with this community and people in this community, because oftentimes there is trauma just around how folks with disabilities are treated, let alone trauma from intersectional identity factors, such as being a trans person or such as being a person of color. And so I think that this takes a lot of thought. This does take a lot of thought. And I think that Antioch in general is teaching practitioners how to become thoughtful critical practitioners. And so we would do well to consider that within the institution as well.
I think something also that I've heard in the spaces where I'm with the disability activists, especially in the Seattle area, one thing that I'm hearing over and over again is there's all these experts who are saying with this condition and this condition, here's what needs to be done. Here's the accommodation that would be helpful. Mm-hmm. Instead of actually centering the person's own experience and what works for them and how they need things to be set up. And also the way that support looks is different for each of us based on trauma, based on oppression, based on trust, or even people saying like, that was a difficult experience for me, I didn't like that, or that was awesome, that person really knows how to support a student. And so I think, you know, sometimes we can get really excited thinking, oh, we're learning exactly what to do through a training or through reading a book. But what we are hearing over and over is we have to really look at every behavior, every directive that we give as, how does this land?
Well, and every person. So it reminds me of another saying in the disability community is, you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. Not them all. Policy can't be created off of personal experience, but personal experience, we would do well to listen to that for starters, and to not stifle folks who want to advocate for this as well.
In the video I shared, you will see some discussion of the issue in disability circles that is being talked about a lot more now. And that is how people who are white, who have been activists, or people who are white, who are getting support they need, they haven't always done a good job or ever done a good job of helping everybody in the group who is not white. And the conversations about, about the police, I think, really highlight this issue, because police response, as we know, is very different if you're white or if you're not white. And what you, like those of you who are mental health training, you might know that the way that people with mental health issues, which is considered a disability issue, where those people are treated by our white systems, by our government, whether it's the police or social workers or therapists or people working in the system in some way. We hear a lot of cases where people have been murdered by the police or killed, or ended up in a horrible situation, being moved from their family home as a child. Moved into foster care, those kinds of things. And so there's like long histories for people with these issues that have never been discussed in academic spaces by white people. And they're training and preparing clinicians and social workers and helping people. And I think because this is such an important issue at our campuses, because of the topics and subject matter that we teach students, it's crucial that everyone really have this understanding and really see how these issues connect. The intersectionality it really does make support so complex.
Yeah, and I think to talk about the privilege that I have as a white person, for those of you who can't see me, as being somebody who has more ability to be out and to be advocating and to be talking and to be stirring the pot. I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that we did this talk, even though I want you to know that there are people of color in the AUDJA who may not feel like they want to be the target of people's aggression if they don't, if somebody doesn't like what we're saying. And I have to tell you, like, even from my own personal experience, and I think everyone from AUDJA can speak about this, either because they've heard it in the affinity group or they've experienced it themselves. There's tremendous backlash against people who speak out about this issue. And so it would make perfect sense to me if students of color who are experiencing disability, or may even be considering whether they have a disability and undiagnosed, would not want to put themselves out there to be talking about it or to be the first person advocating. I'm seeing what's going on in the chat also, and I wanted to speak to accessibility in general, just to define the terms between accommodations and accessibility for everybody to understand that accommodations are on the individual level. Oh, you can't read this like other people, so we will get you a screen reader, just you. Okay, and then accessibility is what recently the Antioch University website has undergone a facelift, right? And with accessibility in mind. Accessibility theoretically benefits everybody. So this is what my friend Jules has told me is called the curb cutter effect. So originally when the curbs were cut down so that people could wheel into the street, it was because they had to, because of the ADA, but it also benefited people who were carrying delivery boxes on a pallet, or mothers with strollers. So the thing to understand about accessibility is that it benefits everybody. A rising tide raises all boats. So this is something that will help teachers. It will be something that helps staff members. It will be something that helps people who don't have disabilities. So people on the chat are talking about Sakai, and you know, I think a great deal of Sakai's problems can be user error. And wouldn't it be great if we had a system that worked for everybody, that was easy to make good for everybody? So I just wanted to acknowledge that there's some chat about that going on in the chat here.
I wanted to bounce off and expand on some of what you were talking about earlier, Jess, because like even say, for example, conceiving of your issues as possibly a disability and then going through the process of getting tested is reliant on a number of our intersexual identities. Some people come from cultures where it's relatively common to be testing kids at 5, 6 years old, tracking what certain disabilities are there and giving them accommodations and support. So they're conditioned to be comfortable saying, oh yeah, I'm dyslexic and I need this accommodation and it's not a big deal. And I've got years of having had people support me in addressing my workload and managing my issues so that I can be successful. And then you have students who've never had that. No one has ever said, hey, maybe the struggles that you're having are related to something that you could test. Or even if they did, they didn't have access to get that diagnosed. I have a friend, she's not at Antioch, but she's in another program, and she's got ADD and dyslexia, and she switched insurance and she can't get access to her meds because they have a series of tests that she has to take. And she's having just issues with the bureaucracy getting reevaluated for something that she already has documentation that she has, so that she can get the accommodations in school. And this is someone, again, who knows that she has it already. And so you have people that go their whole lives not knowing why they have an issue that they have, and it gets reflected back on their other identities, and sometimes perceived in a way as like, oh, this demographic is just this way. Here's another example of that, but on a subconscious level that can be perpetuating and reinforcing. And then you come to school and or workplace environment, and it's the burden is on you as an employee or as a student to say, these are my needs. Here's my documentation. Here's my diagnosis. Here's my letter from someone verifying that this is the case. can I get XYZ? That is not something that every combination of identities is comfortable doing. And I don't know, it's challenging the way the system is set up.
And you're reminding me of this issue of camouflage, which is being talked about not just in the autism spectrum circles, but across disability circles. And that is this behavior that many of us adopt to protect ourselves, to try to appear normal, or to have our disability be undetected, or we try, some of us.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting. And so it will affect your work as a student. It will affect your goals. It will affect your timeline. It will affect retention. And so
also there is very concrete threat of gatekeeping with these issues. It is not beyond a mental health professional to say, well, autistic people can't be counselors, because I've heard it said. So it's also a very concrete fear about people finishing their programs with this. So I think now might be a great time to mention some personal experiences. And I'm also seeing some questions come up in the chat, which is, okay, so what do we do about it? Okay, and I would love to address that in a second. If I forget, which is part of my disability, please somebody just remind me.
I got you.
Thanks. So professor stating how long a writing assignment should take. If you're a professor, we're not trying to parent shame you here, okay? It's not about that. It's just about bringing things into awareness that this can be a microaggression of being dismissive, is telling students what's normal or what you think or how long it would take you to write an assignment undermines how difficult some of the most basic functions of school can be for people with disabilities, especially multiple intersecting disabilities. Also, I would like to say something about support. People who don't have supportive family members or friends, or people who understand or who are in their life or might not be part of a community. This is incredibly taxing just to ask for your needs to be met, just in general. So some rhetoric might say, well, we'll just ask for an extension. It is just not that easy for myriad reasons. Someone mentioning a disability accommodation in an end of term evaluation, saying because this student had to have this and this, then this student actually was not passed for that course and had to retake it. People telling disabled students, you're working too hard, don't spend so much time on this. It negates the complexity of the experience of people with learning disabilities and is a microaggression. It is a micro-invalidation. Comments about grad school is hard. This is a comment that a lot of disabled students get when they challenge a professor, when they say, actually, this Sakai thing wasn't there. I don't know what you want from me. It's not in the syllabus. Can you please tell me where it is? And having a professor meet you with the microaggression, well, grad school is hard. You know, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to figure it out, is also illegal. Please don't say that to your students. Let's see, ableist gatekeeping. Let's see, in the MFT field, by adding more reading and writing coursework as a response to the pandemic. Is that who you want to be keeping out? People who have a hard time writing? Is that what we want to be saying? you can't be a good teacher or you can't be a good counselor if it's difficult for you to write a research paper? Or are there other things that make good workers in those fields? Getting a bad grade, a student getting a bad grade on a paper with 0 feedback, emailing the professor to ask for specifics, their response being just look at the syllabus. This is deferring responsibility for the kind of relational element of learning, is putting all of the responsibility on the student. And this also dovetails really nicely with, just ask the disability person. If you have any problems, you just work it out with that disability person, not even knowing their name. And that's talking about disability support staff. This isn't my issue. This is your issue. I don't have the disability issue, like it's a dirty word.
I have, sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead, Tavani. I'll just keep talking if no one interrupts.
Yeah, I'm coming from another culture, from Africa, the Horn of Africa, where the disability is considered only the deaf guy or blind eye or missing one leg or one hand, or maybe he's in a wheelchair. And maybe, not maybe when he's driving, he used 2 glasses, or maybe when he's reading, need other glasses. You know, this concept is different. I don't like to compare with United States for the origin I came from Africa. But this is it's good to know this, because I never knew myself. Because disability, I think that I'm interested in education. I see the cognitive problems that they have, dyslexia, another problem who cause mental problems. And also they are going to school, they are learning. They need help, but they're learning. Many others, but it's good to know, because I don't know, because when I'm reading in the class, and I took my glasses and I read. I'm disabled. Before today, I never knew before today disability, reading or driving, or maybe using glasses, something like that.
Yeah.
It's good to know. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Tavani. I want to read a few more of these, acknowledging that it's 5 o'clock, that now is the time when some people have to leave. So if you need to leave, you can express your gratitude in the chat and then take off. And I do want to read a couple more student accounts, just so that you can have a little bit more of a picture before we get going with a dialogue type process of this. And Tavani, I'm going to invite you to contribute again once we hit that point. Does that sound all right with you?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. This is a quote. I remember being at the beginning of the program and we were told no one would be quote unquote holding our hand, and that we would have to be on top of things to make sure we needed what we needed to progress through the program. I was okay being told to take initiative over my education, but this statement has revealed itself to mean something else. It's more so the lack of organization and clarity from the administration that makes getting the answers you need difficult. I'm a decent website investigator, so I have been able to find stuff like forms to be signed, etc. But not everyone has the spoons, and this is regarding spoon theory. If you don't know it, you can Google it, or fixation on detail to be able to do that. And I'm also aware I could be, it could be an outdated document anyway. My biggest point is that documentation of processes and requirements should also be accessible. To add an example of this, why this is what we're being told to attend multiple practicum information sessions until we understand the process, when we could easily have a PowerPoint that we could look at again later for ourselves. So it's not a knock on the people who are working hard to put this together, but an overarching problem of inaccessibility. As I said earlier, I'm okay taking responsibility for my education, but I also need to know that what I need to be responsible for makes sense. And so this can also be something like putting captions on in a class, or if you're playing a video, remembering to check closed captioning if you are an instructor, or if you're a student who's giving a presentation. Because people learn things differently. They may learn through reading instead of through hearing. And some people may not be able to hear you as well as you think that they are because they're nodding along with you. Invisible disability is very much real. And people being told, well, you look normal, or you act normal, or you write normal, or whatever, is actually something that people experience a lot in the world, and it shouldn't be what they're experiencing in the institution. And furthermore, it can create academic trauma, the dismissal, and the micro-invalidations that accumulate, in addition to racist microaggressions for students of color, in addition to sexist or transphobic microaggressions that occur for people of other intersections. So I hope that this makes sense, like how this can kind of become an avalanche of snowflakes. So I'd love to open up to the audience. I know that this has been a lot, and I know that sometimes it can seem overwhelming. Yeah, you're welcome. So Clarence, you bring up a really great point. Does AUDJA seek resources to share with disabled students beyond the campus? Does AUDJA invite students from other Antioch campuses? So the Antioch University Disability Justice Alliance, or AUDJA, is an intercampus organization. We have been trying to seek representation from both of the California schools to no avail. So we are actually looking for people from LA and Santa Barbara to join us. We meet once a month on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Once a month, the first Wednesday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And you're welcome to join us for those group planning meetings. And we also have an affinity group that meets every month that we hope to start having it meet every week. But the problem also exists is that the people who are involved sometimes don't have the energy or the chutzpah to be able to do it. So we actually need institutional support to make it possible for these programs to exist for people who can't do everything themselves, if that makes sense. This is the email, DJA, like Disability Justice Alliance, at antioch.edu. That's our email address. You are welcomed to join. Please come join us in any way possible. My name is Jess Minckley. You can email me personally, jminckley@antioch.edu. Also, it's on the websites for the clubs in Seattle as well as New England. And we're trying to gain more visibility, that there actually have been obstacles to gaining visibility on our campus. I am happy to share this document with you, which is an open letter that we wrote to the Antioch community about how to seek support and what happens when those channels of support don't work. And we would really like a voice at the table to be able to talk about those things not working. So for example, one of the reasons why I started AUDJA was because a club that I tried to start on the Seattle campus was thwarted 3 times. It was closed 3 times by the administration of the Seattle campus. So, if you think, well, what's the big deal? Why don't we just do this work? There have actually been very concrete things inhibiting us from doing this work.
I'll have to say, I accidentally showed up for the wrong AUDJA meeting. So I can attest to the amount of student support that is there and available to just talk about your experience and to hear from others and to feel togetherness and belonging. And I just really appreciate your investment, Jess, and to all the people that are doing this, because it would have been so different when I was in school.
And I think one of the things that we want to make sure happens is that AUDJA survives post me graduating. It would be really great if, for example, being the person who opened the Zoom room for our affinity group was getting their faculty service hours by doing that. Right now, it's just out of the kindness of the heart of an adjunct, which is not sustainable. For example. So we're talking institutional support. Another idea that's been floated is, could there be a student who is a liaison between other students and the DSS staff? So for example, it's way easier for a student to come to me, and believe you me, students have come out of the woodwork to contact me, like the disability lady, to tell me their stories. And if they don't feel safe or comfortable speaking to DSS about it, or they say, well, what if this happens? Or what if I don't get my needs met? Or what are they going to ask me? Are they going to deny me because I can't get a doctor's note? It would be really great if the school had a work study position for a student to liaise back and forth, which I think is some of what Danielle's position is intended to do. Of course, it would, like, plenty of attention would need to be paid to FERPA and HIPAA, of course. And it's not impossible to make a community that cares about each other enough to advocate for one another. It's not impossible.
I think that's true.
I want to speak for just like a minute out of gratitude to what the community has offered me. I came into my journey at school knowing that I had disabilities, and I'd never really reflected on what that meant. And I realized through the process of being a part of what was Sick Club and what evolved into AUDJA and doing a similar group with drama therapy students, that I had all of this internalized oppression where I came into school just already assuming, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so ashamed. I have to ask for this accommodation. Like, that was the attitude that I had, that I was already fearful and embarrassed and ashamed to have any type of different disability ability, that it made me a problem as a student. And I was carrying the weight of all of that, but I wasn't aware of it until I met other students and I was seeing them model this. No, I'm great. I'm awesome. I deserve the opportunity to show that. And as I was witnessing my peers doing that, I started to really reflect for myself what was going on. And I can't say that everyone has the same relationship to disability, but for me, the concept that it didn't make me less of a person to have it be a problem to, say, spend a long time on the computer, that I wasn't less of a human being or potentially a less capable therapist because some things are hard for me, was revolutionary and kind of life-changing. And it's been really a great reward to be able to connect with younger students in the program and support them in a similar process.
Thanks, Joe. Callum, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this has been really eye-opening. You mentioned that there were some kind of concrete objections from the administration, and I'm sure there have been. I don't want to immediately pull this card, but I don't know if they're aware of the ADA violations that the lack of accessibility constitutes. So I don't want to go in all nuclear, but if this were a private company, if it was a for-profit entity, certainly they'd have hired consultancy firms and external task forces by now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there are school administrators present in this room. So do with that what you will, and who watch this afterwards. So I think that the voice at the table is happening. It's happening right now. They have also done some reorganizing and some flexible maneuvering to see what needs to be changed recently within the last year. I can tell you that much. Other than that, I don't know, because I'm a student and I'm not an employee of the university, right? So wouldn't it be great if we could have a town hall on the subject and we could ask them, hey, what have you been doing? But this isn't their messy conversation, it's ours. So we'll just wait until that happens, because that would be such great dialogue to have, right? Yeah. Thank you, Callum. I got a message from someone I'm going to keep anonymous, who's a faculty member with multiple disabilities, and said that they have noticed there are ableist assumptions that determine their workload as well. And like I said, there are faculty members who are members of AUDJA as well, who, you know, ultimately would like to see changes for people who are employed by the institution as well. I also would like to just impress upon people before we run out of time that this is an issue that impacts you, whether you know it or not, whether you have a disability or not. So it behooves you to advocate with us, not for us, for this issue as well. Because especially because if you don't have a disability yet, everyone ages and you don't get out of life alive. So it's going to be your issue at some point. It will. Does anybody else want to contribute? I see some stuff going on in the chat. I'm going to read. It can be difficult to speak into a space like this. I just want to honor that.
Can I jump?
Sure, Devani, go ahead.
This is really a disability of the social sciences, particularly psychologists, individuals and other interested in this social psychology. In Somali community, before they come to the United States, or maybe recently, they never knew what's called mental health problem. They say when they talk mental health problem, it's crazy person who talk, who fight, who shout, and that. This is different, another thing. Because when they have mental problem, they go to the physicians. They don't know there exists a psychologist to help them or to go there. They go physicians and tell their stories on what happened to this guy. And the physician says, oh, please, this kind is not my job. Go to psychologist. And then they don't trust psychologists. They go to their own monk or priest or religion leaders to read some verses, because the majority of them are Muslim, to read some verses of Quran.
Yeah, Tavani, you went on mute.
Okay.
So I think what you're speaking to is cultural difference about how much people want to talk about these issues and with whom.
Yes,
also.
yes.
Yes, and there are different expectations for different generations of people as well about that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now they are organizing now. We don't have Seattle here and that kind of organization deal, But
It's all of the campuses. AUDJA is all of the campuses. We just don't have any students who have come to our meetings from LA.
Oh, okay. But we have now they are organized in what they call this in some places in where they call but I don't know. And in another place, they are organized. They are organized. Now they are going psychologists. They have juvenile institution center, and they go there in Minnesota. They are well organized. They are going there now. When they have problem, women, young children, all young educated, and they go there now. And this is very important to know, to distinguish what is physical illness and mental illness. And they have now, they're improving now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think it's really hard to pull some of that apart, Tawane, and I think it's hard for us to have some conversations until we acknowledge that it's all the body is involved in all of this, and all of our ways of coping and thinking about these issues are connected to our bodies. And that was the beautiful recommendation of Menachem's My Grandmother's Hands has really been helpful for me as a white person to think about the white supremacy that I can feel in my body. And when I get directive and guiding with some specific force around, like this needs to be this way or this needs to get done, to really feel, what does that feel like in my body when I'm putting expectations on others? And also to remember for myself what it feels like for me when people have done that with me. And for us to be in a relationship in the way that I think this group has offered for many of us, is to really just be curious and learn from each other in the now about our own experience here in this community and what we can do together to make it better for everybody.
Yeah.
It's really challenging.
I want to visualize the fact that I've been getting a lot of direct messages. So I like want people to know that like during this hour, I've been getting a lot of direct messages of people who want to tell me without talking about it publicly. And that might be learning stuff, and it might be not being out stuff. And so for those of you who have been messaging me, I just want you to know that I have several learning disabilities. So I'm trying really hard to meet your needs. And so I wanted to say one question that I can hang my hat on, which was, what do you advise about the situation when one of my students complains about disability services in the office? Originally, when AUDJA was started, all DSS faculty were invited to all of our planning meetings. Something happened, and then it was a conflict of interest. I don't know what happened, but they stopped coming. And now that the DSS, the person who oversees all of the campus's DSS offices, is no longer listening to the concerns of the community, I don't know what the answer to that is. I would love to have an answer to tell students, here's what happens if you need to go beyond what DSS can offer you. But what I can tell you from my personal experience is that when I did that, and when I did all of the protocol of what it says in AURA and the handbook and talking to my advisor, I was not met with a solution. So I can't in good faith tell my compatriots, contact this person and say this, because I haven't gotten a solution by doing those things. So yeah, that's a great question. What do we tell students who have a problem? And I know that there is an administrator answer to that question. It's this is a rhetorical only at this point. What do we do when DSS does not meet the needs of disabled students? What do we do when the institution gaslights said students about it and then threatens gatekeeping? This is a very concern close to my heart. It's a very good question. I don't know what to tell you, dear anonymous person who sent me that question. But I think that that's why we're having this conversation. Yeah, and if you sent me a question and I didn't see it, just send it again. Will you just send it again and I'll say it now? We've got a few minutes left. Does anybody have a burning desire to speak something into the room? David, I see your hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I just quickly wanted to thank Jess and Sarah Beth and the other members of the conversation group of folk today for coming into Messy Conversations and opening up this space and raising these kinds of issues, and wanted to make sure that you saw all the love that you're getting in the chat. I don't know if you're catching all that, but there's a lot of good stuff going on there, and a real recognition of the time, the energy, the spoons, everything that goes into you being here and raising these issues and being in conversation with us. So thank you.
Thanks. And I also want to acknowledge Felicity. Felicity, yes, you did come to that meeting. Thank you so much for coming to that meeting from LA. And if you have the desire to be an ambassador for your campus, we are seeking folks to do that who are students. We're also actively seeking faculty who are willing to come forward as people with disabilities who would like to work on this issue. I don't know what the Antioch Task Force is, but I don't think that disabled students are at the table in those conversations. Lisa?
Hi, I want to echo what David said and thank you all so much for this. I think this should be required viewing for faculty. I think faculty, I am surprised how often I hear from students that faculty act like they're doing some kind of favor around accommodations, which is just confusing to me, which makes me think that perhaps they just don't know. And so there should be, and with the number of adjuncts we have, but also with core faculty, constant education around these issues.
Thank you. Yes, I think people just don't know. People don't know to ask. They don't know who to talk to. What I do know as a student, and don't ask me why I know this, is that academic technology can help faculty make their courses more accessible, as can the DSS office on any campus. Whether it's an imposition to individual faculty members is another thing that I can't help with. I have tried to advocate for DSS to bring this to faculty assembly on my campus to mixed results. I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make them drink. So these are issues that have always been important to us, that we have always been talking about. Whether or not people think it's important enough is the issue. And so thank you so much for your gratitude, Lisa and David. Like I said before, everybody who has allowed AUDJA to come and have a voice into this space, we are very, very grateful, and we do not mean to disparage the university. We choose to be here. We choose to stay here. We want to make our community a better place. Many of the students that I have met at Antioch are the most wonderful people that I've ever met in my life. And I think that the students are very, very strong, but making it an institution that listens to students, in particular, Black disabled students, will be a wonderful education. for those people who are providing the education.
I just wanted to say as well, and working with Black Student Union in our first meeting coming up, if there was ever an opportunity that something came about where we could work together, or we could find out if students come to me with questions and I could address them to you to try to get them answered. But it's also a part of doing the work and doing the research together to see how we can help individually and as a group. So, I always would love to be a part of that conversation, so that we can always get through it together.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Anybody else have anything that they would like to speak into the room? I think it's important that we do that counselor skill where we just wait.
I would like to ask the second part of the question I put in the chat.
Yes.
Which was, does AUDJA seek resources beyond the campus? Because our accessibility office at Antioch, LA is extremely limited with resources both on campus and off of campus. So I was just wondering if AUDJA possibly stands in the gap of the non-existence of resources for students dealing with disabilities.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how to answer your question, Clarence. Thank you so much for bringing it up. I was hoping that you would be here. I've seen you at other messy conversations. I'm glad that you asked that question. AUDJA is created of individuals. So whether an individual has reached out to a lawyer or gotten tutoring or whatever is totally individual, but as AUDJA as such doesn't have any power really. So we haven't been given an advocacy voice to say, hey, what do y'all want? What do y'all need? What do your constituents want or say or need? So I don't know what you mean beyond the campus. Like, what would an example of that be, Clarence?
Well, this isn't something, I'll use an example that's not necessarily something that has been, well, I don't know if it's been asked in accessibility or not, but I'll just use one example. Say a student needs housing. Like, is there like a resource for housing? Is there like some kind of database that would speak to a disabled student in a given, locale? That could be one example.
Yeah.
The student's ability to function as a student, writing, reading, all those physical things that they may be challenged with, who is really the, adapt person to explain or to provide, technology resources, who beyond that one person who's taxed on campus with 15,000 other responsibilities, who can actually get to such a resource or get to such a database.
Yeah. And I think Danielle is kind of that person on the Seattle campus, but each campus is doing things differently. And so in general, I don't know. We aren't employed by the institution. We're just a dozen people that kind of show up and talk about things and organize and gather research on our own. But I think that your question really speaks to the interconnectedness of all of the hierarchies of need that people need to be able to meet their own needs. Absolutely. But we don't have that capacity at this time at AUDJA. I want for it to be a place where a lot of people come and where we can support each other more, but it will never replace the institution's responsibility to uphold student success. It's more of a community of care and belonging, like someone was saying before. I think
I think Cynthia Ruffin last week in this messy conversation really said it well about when the affinity groups are all operating on the campus, then there's a healthier environment for all of us and people feel supported and connected. And really that's the intention. And if there's more needs that we have to uncover to support students, let's do it.
Anna?
Well, thank you, Jessie. I just want to interject to Clarence's question. In Santa Barbara, we do have a resources that actually refer students to housing. And within the housing contact, the person should be able to identify to the students what areas that actually provide disabled housing for them. And as for the technology, is that the student service in Santa Barbara regularly educate or inform the chairs about what are the technology that we can provide to the students in terms of completing homework, how to help them. I think referring the students to the right person, it will be the approach that we should adopt. And I think Jess is right, is that the support group is to help out each other, to talk about the problems, or maybe sometimes speak up on behalf of the group to speak to the right person and get the resources. If we have the resources, then they will refer you to the right place. And if they don't, then at least the faculty and the chairs are aware that these are the resources that's lacking. So maybe in the future, we should add that.
Yeah. I think also, like, if students aren't seeking accommodations, and if they don't know how to do that, then faculty are going to be less aware that students even need that, right? So I think that if the institution did something more to make it out there, and a presence on a table at orientation, or a page on the website, or whatever we can do in services, all of that, to just try to make this more part of the conversation, I think that is going to help us be a richer community, for sure. So I realize also we're over time, and I just am feeling very grateful and flattered that there's still 26 people here listening to this conversation. So thank you all who have attended. MC Sarah Beth, what do you think?
I think this was fantastic, and I think this is the first of many more.
Awesome. Everybody, thank you so much for your questions and your thoughtfulness. I appreciate you, and you're welcome to come to any AUDJA stuff at any time.
Thank you for being here, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
So are there some people that are sticking around? Yeah, it looks like is that what we're doing?
This is we just do a little bit of chat for a few moments, and then we go our separate ways. How was it for you two?
Good. I feel like I talked a lot. Sorry, Cheryl.
Very informative.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I think this was a door opening.
Yeah. I feel very vulnerable. I feel like
I so appreciate you.
Very out there, but
no, it's even though you feel very much out there, I hope you notice or realize that what a great job you did today. And this means a lot to not just the students, but also to the faculty, because sometimes it's that the faculty is not that we don't want to help. And when the students are not speaking up, we don't know what to help, and we don't know how to help. Particularly, we don't want to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to raise it or assume anything.
Well, you can't ask them about it, even if they have an ELOA. So I was an adjunct faculty member in Los Angeles for many years at 3 different schools. And so I know what it's like to be on the other end of this also. I think that's the AUDJA intends to work seamlessly with the systems that are in place to help people. I would love to be able to refer students when they come to the disability lady. I would love to be able to be like, this is your DSS person. I would also love to get paid to be telling all these people these things like every week. This is who you go to. This is the link for it. Look it up. We could make a handbook. We can do whatever we would want, right? Like it's not, I'm not trying to create an antagonistic relationship. I really want to work together to make this easier for faculty to meet the needs of students.
I wish that we, like as an organization, Antioch would try to actually get a pulse on what the student experience is around this, because I hear a lot of stuff from other students. I don't think it's getting to the powers that be because people are uncomfortable voicing it. But if like consistent issues were brought to the attention and like, all right, a lot of students have XYZ problem, microaggressions or implementation of this or that, maybe something could actually be done to make it better. There's a bit of a feedback loop where people don't give the information for the same reasons why they're having issues.
Well, and where we assume that it's just an individual's needs we need to meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where it's just accommodations and it's so much more than just individual case by case. Because if one person comes forward, there's 45 other people who have had that experience for sure.
Yep.
And it's not just a complainer. It's not somebody just trying to, like, who would do that? Who would spend their time being embarrassed by somebody saying, you can't possibly be telling the truth. You can't possibly need that accommodation. That sounds so ridiculous. What a complainer you are.
I would like to share
You would think if, oh, I'm sorry. You would think that it would be part of onboarding to campus. The list of resources that are supposed to be available to you are supposed to be part of onboarding. They're supposed to be a part of orientation. And it just baffles me that a resource person isn't provided or doesn't speak to each group when they start classes.
But, you know, I relate to the fact that it might be overwhelming, right? Where people are signing terms and conditions of things just to get through paperwork. Like those resources might be given, but they need to continue to be given. They need to be demonstrated. They need to understand what the impact is on students, not just a link in a faculty handbook that says contact Jill Hadaway. Like it's more than that. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, the handbook is what, like 100 pages, and they tell you to read it before you start your program. When I did my orientation, we were the first month that the first quarter that was full on pandemic, and they couldn't figure out Zoom. And so we didn't get told a lot of things, but sure, we had access to the handbook, but there's so much information there. And then for some students with disabilities, it's an emerging recognition that, oh, maybe I actually have something, and oh, maybe I should. By the time they make that connection, it might have been a year since they looked at that handbook, and it's a lot to keep track of.
It also needs to be woven through all of the coursework.
This is like what I've been advocating for is including disability awareness with the multicultural component, so that in the same way that gender identity, sexual orientation, ethnicity, the same way that these things are discussed, that we include the vectors of ability to kind of clue people in that that's a conversation to be had also. I wish it was just part of the curriculum.
I really like on the syllabus or something. Yeah.
Well, and it's on the syllabus, but I think it's one of those things that people just glaze over, you know, because people don't understand
Too much.
Hey, if you're having a lot of anxiety about this, it might be a disability. If you have always experienced anxiety around reading, if you have always experienced a lack of accessibility with digitized PDFs that are scans of Xeroxes of Xeroxes of Xeroxes, you know, this benefits everyone.
See, and I think faculty can learn to say that. They can learn to say that in the beginning of classes. They can talk about it and just make it a regular part of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that a lot of faculty are on the same pulse. I have had some faculty that were really like, oh yeah, accommodation letter. Oh yeah, I know this. And I've had others that told me incorrect information about what they were not supposed to do, not because I'm guessing they were mean, but because they genuinely believed what they were saying was accurate. And the problem is, from a student perspective, when you're a new student and a teacher tells you, oh, well, let me tell you how it is, it takes a lot of moxie to question that and then pursue it further. And so that teacher continues propagating that false information, which reinforces their belief that it's right because it never gets questioned. The whole administration would have to be on board to supporting faculty in integrating that. It couldn't just be like, oh, faculty mentioned this. The whole culture would have to shift, I think.
That's right.
When I think it's still neoliberal mentality to assume that the onus is on each individual to do this. It's on you to do it yourself, as opposed to we are going to support you to have this be built into the fabric of the way that we think about education.
I think we need an overhaul of re-educating the faculty and re-educating the students, that we should actually join hands. This is not the problem of the student, this is a problem of the faculty as well. And so we all have to redefine how do we see the problem, how do we approach it. I think the biggest problem so far I've heard is, and thanks for bringing this up, is that there is not a system where people can find information easily. And the most important part is not just information, it's about the trust. Is that if you give them, I don't know, even if you're talking about 20 pages, you see that all schools have it. But it's not a human being that I can see eye to eye to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to help you. I'm going to hold your hand, not to be concerned. If you have problem, come to me. It's very hard for the students to think, is this for real? I mean, that's
well, and it's performative. So if you send me a link and you don't have anything to back it up, then you don't care if I am a Black student with dyslexia and I drop out. You don't care. Don't send me a link. A link means nothing. The link makes you feel better.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the pandemic makes it even worse because we can't see people face to face. And in normal times, say, okay, all right, so-and-so, why don't you meet me in my office? Let's have a chat. Let's talk about what.
And the pandemic is also like, should be lighting a fire under everybody's butt, because every single person in the world has trauma responses right now.
Yeah.
Every single person, except maybe Jeff Bezos.
So I'm not sure, I don't know what goes on inside of other people, of course, but my sense is that not everybody, not all of the faculty and staff at my school are thinking about accessibility issues as a social justice issue. I have experienced some people that act as though they are, as someone said, doing me a favor, not meeting my needs in a way that they are morally and ethically obligated to do. And so when issues of ableism and microaggressions have come up in my classes, they haven't been met with the same type of conversation that similar missteps around gender identity and race have been met, because there isn't a sort of collective consent that this is a thing that we're all working on together. There's a question about whether or not it's a thing at all. And so when I say you had a microaggression against me, they're like, no. And they're not saying, I'm the person in power. I'm the teacher. Like, I'm telling you how it is. It's my job to be, I'm at a social justice school. And the energy is very confusing. And then it signals to the other students in the class, like, oh, this is a separate issue. And so I think education of faculty and staff would be great, but it needs to permeate in a different way. If we're not all on board that we're trying to do this type of work, because it's such difficult work, we can't support each other in doing it. We can't be arguing about whether it's a thing that we're trying to do or not, or whether it exists or not. And right now it's muddled, and some people are fantastic, some are outstanding, but it's highly inconsistent.
I also want to just say that the two of you are grad students, and that is a different situation. Like, we have so many undergraduate students who are afraid to ask for these things or afraid to talk about these issues. And then they will come into the graduate programs and they will be even more disoriented, really more frustrated. And so it's like, because we have so many of our undergraduate grads who go into our graduate program, it behooves our entire campuses to really get this straightened out.
No, I want to be clear though, because Jess put it in the comments. I'm afraid too. I had an issue in my class this quarter where my teacher pulled me and another student who had the same accommodation, asked us to stay after class. And I was like, both of you have the same accommodation. How would you like it to play out? And I sent the teacher an email saying, hey, that didn't make me feel very good, because my disability status is something I want to disclose. She's like, oh, no, I didn't disclose your disability status. I didn't do that. You have this accommodation sheet. And I'm like, no, the fact that I have an accommodation means that I have a disability, or I wouldn't have you can't. And
see all the teachers squirming in their chairs, all the professors are squirming.
The thing is, like, when I wrote her the email, I was shaking. And this is a teacher that I happen to like and think well of, and had reason to believe would not retaliate against me. Like there was a million things in favor of it being safe. And even so, to just say, hey, this didn't feel good to me, triggered me in a PTSD type of manner, where my heart was racing and I was sweating and I was terrified. If this is not a teacher that I thought was safe, I wouldn't have even been able to send the email. And as it is, I didn't feel comfortable escalating the issue because I don't want to create conflict with the teacher who's grading me. And I have a similar response anytime I have to push back. And sometimes I don't when I need something, because the trauma of doing it is so detrimental to me that I have to kind of weigh those pros and cons. And it shouldn't be like that. But and then everyone often perceives me to not be afraid and to be bold because I say it at all. And I just want to be like, no, for me anyways, it's not like that. It's terrifying.
I think for the many of our graduate students, it is different than for undergrads. And most of our graduate programs are professional training programs. So these are literally gatekeepers into a profession. And that's a lot to carry. And for our undergraduates, you know, a lot of them, this is a generalization, but a lot of them are coming in, returning to school with certain records playing in their head about their academic abilities and whether or not they can actually do this. And so they tend to, my experience has been, they tend to then, they want to show up, right? They want to do it. So they hide whatever disabilities they might be wrestling with, and, until they find themselves drowning. And then like, oh, hell, help me. And then often they're not met graciously because, well, why didn't you come with this 6 months ago?
Well, and that's something that's really characteristically true of all trauma survivors. Why don't you tell me that happened 5 months ago? Well, because I was in a trauma response.
Yeah. I think that this is one of my bees in my bonnet about the way the accommodation system is set up, because the burden is on you, the student, to ask for what you need. And if you don't ask, or if you ask and you get told the wrong answer and you don't push back, or if you ask and you get told an answer that doesn't help, but you don't advocate further a level up, they push it back on you and say, well, yeah, it was on you to advocate and therefore it's you know, we were here. It's not my fault that she gave you wrong information. You should have known that this is your opportunity to learn how to advocate for yourself, and as a disabled person you need to be able to do that. We're offering you this great opportunity to gain the skills that you need, and there's no recognition about how burdensome it is. For many people it feels like if I out myself, I put myself in jeopardy. But if I don't, then it's my fault and it's on me. And this feeds into that internalized oppression where somehow, no matter what I do, no matter how I play this out, I'm doomed and I'm wrong and I'm in danger. Therefore, since no matter what I do, somehow I'm in trouble, the problem must be me, is happening on a subconscious level. And it's a really big problem.
And then,
Right.
and then
And
students
the
get put on
solution-
and off
That's wrong.
probation as well.
Right.
Like they're grappling with probation, like the university is actually saying, not good, not good, not good. And so then they have to try to get out of their own experience.
Well, and the solution could just be to have accessible classrooms, and then nobody would need to ask for their individual need accommodations.
Yeah, why can't everybody have a readable version of a PDF? I'm sorry, those triple scan ones that you mentioned where it's sideways and like, I'm sorry, that's not acceptable for any student paying what we're paying to be.
Well, and the truth of the matter is that the community colleges that I taught in at Long Beach and Santa Monica, like if you were going to show any YouTube video, you had to make sure it was captioned, and the university would caption it for you if it wasn't even captioned. I had deaf students and blind students in my classroom. And I think Antioch is so ill prepared, even for the most extreme cases, like having 34 students shoved into one classroom, you know, and not have chair accessibility and be beyond the fire department code. Like, if we can't even meet the most extreme needs, then we have a problem. When I did my disability talk, I asked if we could have ASL interpreters, and they asked me, well, but do you really know anyone deaf that's going to come? And then when I said, this is a social justice issue in perpetuity that you need to consider all the time, and then they were like, okay, well, do you know anyone?
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that
and then they said, okay, we'll pay for this one time, but your other lectures, we're not going to do it.
Putting the burden on the student to say, hi, I can't understand your YouTube video because I have a hearing issue, forces the student to out themselves, to ask. And by that point, they've already been shown a 1 class or 2 classes worth of these videos, and they have to go to DSS and get it sorted. When you just offer the accommodation, I don't want to call it that, I don't know what else to, from the get-go, then anyone who needs it is served without it having to be a thing, and it normalizes it and says, this is just, we're just assuming that anyone might need this, so it's not a problem, you're not deviant, it's just there. And some people don't have hearing problems, but it's hard for them to process, or maybe they have a bad internet connection and there's a lag. But